People pleasers are often the most admired folks in the room. They're just so polite and super considerate, hyper aware of what others need before anyone has to say it out loud. They move with that soft, almost angelic attentiveness that makes other people feel safe. If you've ever been on the receiving end of that presence, you know how tempting it is to mistake it for pure goodness, pure selflessness, pure emotional intelligence. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to admit. People pleasers aren't born, they're trained, and recognizing this can inspire hope for change. And the world praises the result, not the wound that created it, because behind that calming smile is a nervous system running silent calculations. Beneath that, casual sure, no problem is a body ready for trouble. Behind that warm empathy is a mind rehearsing the worst-case scenario if they ever dared to disappoint. This is the paradox of people-pleasing. The world thinks you're kind, but you know you're scared. You know how it feels to agree to something that knots your stomach, only to later feel exhausted or drained because your boundaries are blurred. You know how it feels to replay a conversation at 2 a.m., dissecting your tone, checking if you sounded rude or too blunt, pulse tightening with every imagined mistake. You know how it feels when someone says, "I need a favor," and your chest tightens before they finish the sentence. Your body is already preparing to say yes. If this is you, hear this carefully. Healing begins with honesty and boundary setting, creating safety within yourself. You're not weak. You're not dramatic. You're not overly sensitive. You're carrying an archetype older than your adult self, older than your coping skills, older than the stories you tell yourself about being the easy one. The core archetype of people-pleasing is simple to name and devastating to confront. The child who learned, "Love only feels safe when I earn it." This is where the dark psychology begins, not in manipulation, not in tactics, but in the quiet, lifelong haunting of conditional worth. A nervous system shaped by the fear of being too much or not enough. People don't choose people-pleasing. Their body chooses for them. Because long before you learned the language of emotions, your body knew the consequences of conflict, the consequences of disappointment, the consequences of needing too loudly. Maybe that training came from a parent whose approval felt unpredictable. Warm one moment, cold the next. It could have come from a household where the air thickened before anger erupted, teaching you to anticipate moods before they changed. Maybe it came from being the responsible one, the child who held the family together because the adults couldn't hold themselves. The body remembers what the mind tries to rationalize. Your pulse learned to speed up when someone frowned. Your diaphragm learned to freeze before someone raised their voice. Your voice learned to shrink when someone needed something from you. And the world saw that shrinking and called it kindness. But inside, it felt like survival. Here's the dark twist. People pleasers look emotionally intelligent because they've spent their entire lives studying emotional weather. They're experts in micro-expressions, tone shifts, hidden tension, unspoken needs. Their nervous system has become a hyper-tuned instrument for detecting danger wrapped in human behavior. But that sensitivity, the very skill others admire, was forged in fear, not freedom. This is why people-pleasing is so misunderstood. It looks like generosity, but it feels like vigilance. It looks like empathy, but it feels like scanning. It looks like flexibility, but it feels like erasure. Underneath, "it's fine. Don't worry about it," is a body preparing for the subtle punishment of not being perfect enough, not agreeable enough, not easy enough, not lovable enough. And if you feel that in your chest while listening, that tightening, that quiet ache, that's the body speaking the original truth. You learn to keep the peace by abandoning yourself. To understand the dark psychology of people-pleasing, we have to name the archetype without flinching. This archetype isn't nice. It isn't helpful. It isn't selfless. It's adaptive submission, a nervous system strategy disguised as personality. It's the child who learned that shrinking kept the household calm, the teen who learned that silence prevented rejection, the adult who learned that serving others prevented abandonment. Real or imagined, and here's where the psychology turns dark. People-pleasers don't overgive because they feel secure. They overgive because their identity depends on being useful. If they stop being useful, They fear they will stop being loved. You can feel this truth in the body. A subtle collapse in the chest, a hollowing in the stomach, a buzzing behind the ribs that says, don't upset them. Don't disappoint them. Don't lose your place. This archetype doesn't want love. It wants safety disguised as love, and the world rewards this. Jobs reward this, and relationships exploit it. Friends depend on it. Society romanticizes it, all while the people-pleaser quietly dissolves. This is why the praise hurts. Every compliment about being so thoughtful hits like a reminder of the cage you can TC but always feel, because the truth is brutal. People-pleasing is a survival art. But survival is not the same as living. And if you've ever looked at yourself in the mirror and felt that quiet, aching emptiness, that sense that you're performing a version of yourself, designed for everyone but you, you're already sensing the edge of the archetype cracking. This crack is where the story turns, where the mask starts to slip, where the real psychological work begins, where the core mechanisms reveal themselves. The subtle violence of self-erasure is the moment people-pleasers never talk about. The microsecond where your body knows the truth, and you betray it anyway. It's the nod instead of the boundary, the sure, no problem instead of the honest no, the small smile that hides the internal collapse. Neurologically, this is the dorsal vagal drop, a quiet shutdown, a freezy response disguised as politeness. Your body folds in on itself like it's bracing for impact. But on the outside, you look calm, pleasant, and agreeable, like nothing inside you is dying. That's the split. The outside self-performing safety, the inside self-whispering, this isn't who I am, and here's the dark twist people avoid. People-pleasing is not kindness. It's covert self-betrayal, a violence you commit inward to prevent imagined violence outward. You become the child again, whispering, if I disappear just enough, maybe they won't leave. If I stay small, they won't explode. If I make them happy, maybe someone will finally see me. But your nervous system remembers every disappearance. It remembers every silenced truth. It remembers that you traded authenticity for survival, and survival has a cost. You can't be fully alive while constantly negotiating your existence. This is the fire child paradox in its purest form. To stay warm, you sit close enough to the fire to burn, because at least the burning proves you are still here. There's a grief no one mentions, the grief of realizing you lived most of your life as someone else. Kierkegaard said, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. Jung warned that the shadow becomes hostile the longer it's ignored. People-pleasers carry a lifetime of quiet despair, not because they failed, but because they succeeded at the wrong thing. Here are the 6 hidden adult patterns that emerge. Pattern 1. Chronic overfunctioning. On the outside, you look responsible. On the inside, you're drowning in roles no one asked you to play. Pattern 2. Emotional shapeshifting. Others call you adaptable. But you know the truth. Your personality bends to the room like smoke. Pattern 3. Delayed anger. You never explode in the moment, but days later, you feel volcanic rage with nowhere to go. Pattern 4. Attachment to emotional projects. You pick partners who need fixing, because fixing them distracts from the work you refuse to do within yourself. Pattern 5. Selective disappearance. You withdraw from people who might actually care, because real intimacy requires the one thing you avoid, being fully visible. Pattern 6. The worthiness echo. Every compliment feels fake, because deep down, you know they love the mask, not the person behind it. These patterns aren't flaws. They're survival stories written in adult handwriting, echoes of a child who learned that peace came from self-erasure and never learned how to stop disappearing. Healing from people-pleasing isn't about becoming confident. It's about becoming honest. Jung said, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. The unconscious here is the child who still thinks they have to earn love. The shadow is the adult who resents everyone for what they once needed. Reclaiming yourself begins with micro-truths. I don't want that. I don't agree. I need space. Small, simple truths that reteach your nervous system that honesty is survivable. Then comes the end bridge. I love you, and I need boundaries. I care about you, and I won't self-erase. I want a connection, and I won't abandon myself for it. This is where the real change begins. Now ask yourself, which relationships only work when you're smaller? Where do you shrink yourself first? Who benefits when you stay silent? Who would still stay if you stopped performing? Sit with the answers. They're your map back to yourself. And here is the truth you've avoided for years. You are allowed to be fully human. Not agreeable, not convenient, not emotionally predictable. Fully human. If you want more content that explores the psychology behind your patterns and the silent agreements you never realized you made, please like and share this with someone who could benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to navigate this inner work alone. Remember, the goal isn't to fix you. It's to help you feel whole at last.